This is Module 17, Engaging with Communities for Access to Justice. My name is Jane Chukowski. I'm CEO of SM Sehgal Foundation in Gurgaon, Haryana. I'm delighted to lead this discussion today, and I actually hope that you will watch this in small groups, that you and others who are studying this module will sit together and talk about some of the issues that will come up during this videotape. The objectives of this session are to talk about how we engage with communities for justice issues. We as legal professionals want to help citizens participate, citizens be empowered to exercise the rights that they have. As you know from other modules in this series, there are many rights that various categories of people have, as well as general rights available to all. We can help through our work as students, faculty, paralegals, and other legal professionals in the community. People seize those rights, claim those rights, access those rights to enjoy a dignified life. In terms of this session, we will not only look at the issue of legal empowerment, but also at methods for helping people achieve legal empowerment. One method is legal literacy camps, and those camps often cover relevant government schemes, flagship government schemes that allow marginalized people to meet their basic needs for food, shelter, education, health services, electricity. These are schemes that perhaps we do not think about as legal rights, but for people who are poor and marginalized, these basic necessities are certainly part of the legal rights they need to be assisted with. As we look at this module, we're also going to talk about communications. Those of you who are LLM students, which I understand is the majority of people watching this module, you have learned a lot of legal jargon. That legal jargon may be very helpful to you in the courtroom, but in dealing with communities, it's really important that you speak in a language that is clear to the communities with whom you are engaging. So one must remember the situation of those communities. One must investigate and find out the situation of communities to understand how to target communications to them so that people understand, so that people trust you and tell their story to you so that you can help analyze and find their options. You as LLM students or bachelor students have typically a limited amount of time that you are spending in community while you're in academic life. It's really important that you learn how to collaborate with civil society groups that are there for the long haul. Because it's those civil society groups, whether they're called NGOs or community-based organizations or self-help groups, those are the organizations that have established relationships with communities. And you, as someone who may be somewhat passing through, should work with people who have already built trust in a community. If you are a member of a marginalized group, or you have been working with a community for a long time, of course, you may have established those relationships already yourself. But for many students that we see, their time commitment is relatively brief, and they have to remember that the community is there for the long haul and sees a lot of students come through. So you will have to figure out how to establish your own credibility. Other objectives of this session relate to your professional role and your behavior with the communities. When dealing with communities with whom you're conversing at a very straightforward level without legal jargon, you may have a tendency to think that you are the expert and they are the learners. But in point of fact, you as lawyers, you as LLM students, are there to learn just as much as the community is there to learn from you, because you must understand the context in which they're living for any of your analysis to make any sense. So a rule of thumb for dealing with communities is that you should use participatory methods. So you are speaking with them and they are speaking with you. You are perhaps conducting role plays to give them an opportunity to express emotions and ideas that come directly from their experience. So these participatory methods will enrich your learning and also help build your relationship with them, while you're also learning a lot of important information from the client community. Another aspect of the professional role is ethics. We think of ethics in terms of courtroom behavior, but ethics permeates all of our behavior. And in dealing with communities, it's extremely important. When we speak of dealing with marginalized communities, we know that the communities have already received the short end of the stick in many ways from society. It's very important that legal professionals dealing with the communities are honest, are zealous, follow through on what they say they will do. So these are all aspects of ethics. Another indication that you should be looking for is whether your advice is accurate. It's important to give high quality legal advice to people of marginalized communities. When you're having conversation in plain language, you may have an instinct to talk conversationally without your full professional analysis weighing in, but that's not your role. Your role is to give high quality legal advice to people. And so it's important to make sure that you check what you say for its accuracy. Another aspect of your professional role is that you're not acting in isolation. You are part of the legal profession, and the way that India has designed legal professionals to work with marginalized communities is that there has been the establishment of the National Legal Services Authority with state legal services authorities and district legal services authorities with clinics even in villages. It is important that you engage with the Legal Services Authority in your area. Your law school will likely be doing this, but even you as an individual should make sure that you know the people in the Legal Services Authority. Why? Well, if the Legal Services Authority is doing a great job, you stand a lot to learn from them. If the Legal Services Authority is limping for lack of full participation, you can help empower this institution to be more effective, to be more functional in the area in which you're working. Networks are important because they have a history, they have an institutional memory, and it's important to engage with them as opposed to just doing work on your own, which will tend to get lost once you're gone. Along the same line, part of your professional role is to contribute to the development of poverty law resources. When we think of work for the corporate world, we know there are a lot of books we can buy, there are a lot of resources, a lot of training events that we could go to learn more about how to represent the corporate world. But for marginalized people, it's important that we develop an equally robust set of resources to help lawyers do their level best, to help law students learn effectively about poverty law issues. So what you do in engaging with communities is something that you should try to feed into either law school efforts, legal services authority efforts, or private law firm efforts to develop good resources for other law students and lawyers to use. My examples during this module will come from rural India. The non-governmental organization with which I works on water, agriculture, and good governance, and has a radio station in Haryana. Many of the points that I'm making equally apply in urban India, and I'm sure you'll be able to come up with parallel examples. One reason I choose rural India as the basis for my examples is because the context is dramatically different from that of urban India, where most of us involved in law schools and law firms are working. Some of you will have had rural experience, and you'll know these examples that you can share with your classmates. Others of you will actually not know the context. You'll not know how people light their homes, where they get their water, what kind of sanitation they have available, what the schools are like. Do the schools have water and toilets or not? Where we work, they don't. Do the people have fresh water? Are they harvesting rainwater? Is the groundwater saline? All of these contextual issues really matter to people as they try to survive. So you, as an urbanite, will need to be very curious with rural populations to understand what their daily life is actually like. So this is true for you as a lawyer, and it's true for you in any context. So whether you ultimately become a corporate lawyer and need to learn about your corporate client's business, or whether you're working with marginalized people, context is extremely important. One thing that may be unique in rural areas is the way that there are justice disruptions. In other words, in some villages, caste is still a huge issue. In some villages, the power dynamics are such that courts won't work properly, or government line departments won't work properly. There may be bias against certain groups of people. You will need to remember that and investigate that as you go into a community. Otherwise, the lofty vision you have of the justice system from what you've studied in law school may not be applicable. You'll have to figure out how to bring justice into a situation like that, where there are power dynamics and bias that distort access to justice. So who are the stakeholders in access to justice? Of course, the community members, those women, children, disabled people, elderly people, people of low economic standing, many groups of people that other modules have talked to you about, teachers of other modules have talked to you about. We immediately, of course, think of courts as an institution involved in access to justice. But my message to you is that we as lawyers need to make sure that the communities know how to solve problems, as many as possible, before they go to the courts. For people who are trying to access benefits for food, for rural employment, and for other government benefits, right to education, right to information, government offices are often the first place that the community should go. So we as lawyers and law students need to know which government offices are handling which issues so that we properly channel people to those individuals. We also need to be aware of stakeholders like other NGOs, paralegals, law students besides your own institution, gram panchayats, which play roles in villages in accessing certain government benefits, And then we can also think about teachers, employers, doctors, other people who are influencers. They're educated people in a community who actually can help people solve problems through local discussion as opposed to court process. Courts are expensive, they're slow, they're foreign to most marginalized people, they're not comfortable in those settings. So to the extent that problems can be worked out speedily, fairly, without going to court, that's an excellent solution. And I realize law school, for the most part, has not concentrated on that. But you as a lawyer will be a problem solver for your community. So it's important for you to think of those negotiation options before thinking of court. Who else is a stakeholder? I would say society at large. We know that the marginalized in India is the majority. No one is able to enjoy equal rights if the largest part of the population does not enjoy equal rights. Everyone's at risk, frankly. So it's very important to society at large that we support equal access to justice, fairness in relations in the community. We all benefit from that. At this point in the module, I will show some visual images, and the camera will cut to that. Citizen participation is critical for engaging with communities. If one finds that one is giving a lecture to a community without engaging with that community, there's probably a real missed opportunity. So it's important to stop periodically, make sure that you engage members of communities that you're visiting, to find out how they are understanding what you're saying and what questions they have about what you're saying, and whether what you're saying is at all relevant or important to them. Find out their definition of legal needs, and you will have an interested group of people to engage with. As you enter a community, it's important to find out what injustice means in the local context. Your mission is to help with access to justice, so knowing what the injustices are is one of your first issues. What are the community's legal needs? People who do not have enough for basic necessities, such as food, clothing, educational access, need to know about government schemes. You can do a needs assessment to find out what the situation is in the villages that you're visiting, to figure out which government schemes are most applicable. In addition to government schemes, there are public services such as access to healthcare services, access to education, and proper support from the police. Many marginalized communities may be afraid to file first information report with the police because they don't think they'll be taken seriously. That in itself is an access to justice issue. So as you are diagnosing the situation in a community, that's one of the things to look for. There's the issue of human rights law enforcement. Find out if in communities in which you're working, there are human rights violations going on. In addition to these, there's a whole range of other rights that people have, contractual rights, and so part of your needs assessment will be to look into problems that people are having. It may be new for you to be in a community where the livelihoods are farm livelihoods. There, government benefits will include farm subsidies that you may not know about. So this is an area that you will have to find out if it's an issue for the community and if it's one that you need to research. Rural employment is another major issue. And of course, we have the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act that affords 100 days of work a year to families who are eligible. Find out what are the issues in the Manrega program in the area in which you're working. Are people actually getting their job cards? Are they actually getting paid for their work? Is the work being conducted properly? In the reading materials that accompany this module, I have a case which talks about a community that was able to secure job cards that had been held by the Sarpanch improperly. And it poses to you some questions about what you would do if you were a law student running across that situation. Another major issue where we work, and in many parts of India, is access to water. Now, law students may react that water is not really a legal issue, but of course, access to water is a basic human right. And if there isn't water in the community where you're working, you need to figure out what are the legal levers for getting that community water. The right to education is an important way for people in rural areas to have opportunity to actually change their future from what it will otherwise likely be if they remain in the situation where they were raised. There are many gaps between the Right to Education Act and the implementation of that law in rural areas. It's important for you as a citizen as well as for a law student to be aware of those gaps and see in what way you or civil society organizations can contribute to the implementation of that right. Part of the problem in schools is facilities, that there may not be sanitation and water that students need in order to stay there all day. Another problem that we see is there are not enough teachers, and that seems almost insoluble. So what would be the policy steps that might need to be taken in order for your engagement with community to actually lead to a solution that would be helpful? So in terms of legal philosophy, I mentioned at the beginning legal empowerment of marginalized communities. What's involved with that? First of all, communities need to be aware of their rights. They have to have the capacity to assert their claim, which means the confidence to speak up, knowing who to take problems to, when, if there are timelines, and where, so that they can secure outcomes, favorable outcomes. As lawyers, we have a tendency to be involved with process, but frankly, process in and of itself doesn't help people. It may help them avoid violence because they have a process to go through, but what people really want is to have the positive outcomes that they seek. Positive, just outcomes. Awareness of rights and knowing how to monitor whether local officials, local government is delivering public services as they should is an essential way to root out corruption in the community. So citizens who meet their basic needs then have the right to enjoy public services such as school, health, and safety, enjoy human rights law protections and other legal rights. So if we've empowered people so that they can handle a lot of problems on their own, they still need to know how do they access a lawyer when they absolutely need one, how do they access a lawyer when they need to go to court or they otherwise have a problem that they can't handle on their own. So what are the methods of community engagement? Awareness campaigns are a major one, and in the materials that you'll see on my slides and also in the materials that are part of the reading module, you'll find a lot of examples of awareness campaigns and community media for conveying them. One form of community media that is very popular and energizing is community radio. If there's a community radio in the area where you're working, you'll find that it serves as a platform for citizens to express their concerns. So it's important for you to actually listen to the community radio. And in my materials, you can click on a link to listen to the community radio in our area. Awareness campaigns may occur through schools, through flyers, through posters, and basically engage with civil society organizations that know how to raise awareness in your area. Law students are often involved in legal literacy camps, bringing information about specific government schemes and other legal issues to the community, setting up in one place in a district so that people can come in with their problems. Another method of community engagement is workshops that you could conduct with civil society organizations, where the civil society organization knows the local context and you know the legal aspects. Participatory research on justice issues is another way to engage with communities. If there's a problem in the community and it's important if there's a problem in the community and it's important to collect data to prove that it's a problem in the community, participatory research is an important method to use. At this point in my module, I'll show you some visual images of wall paintings in schools. It may seem curious to those of us living in cities to see these wall paintings, but if you think about it, there's no better way in a village to be transparent about information than to publicly paint information on a wall. So you'll see in the next slides images of wall paintings about midday meals, saying what food the children are supposed to receive. That's important because one of the forms of corruption in school lunch programs is that the people providing the food may siphon it off and give the children something of lesser quality or lesser quantity. So these wall paintings are really important so parents know what to look for to monitor a midday meal. Another slide in this module is about public distribution system, that is wheat or rice, sugar, kerosene, these rations that are made available at subsidized price. Ration shops, again, have to be monitored carefully because there's the opportunity for siphoning off quantities and quality. But these wall paintings let people know what they should be demanding. In dealing with communities, it's important to find out the literacy rate. Where we work, many people are illiterate, particularly women who have been encouraged to stay home and do domestic chores or farm chores rather than complete their schooling. We've realized that posters that show graphically what people's rights are very important. It helps people remember the stories that connect to schemes. On the next slide is a public distribution system poster that shows in the upper left corner a dysfunctional PDS shop, and in the forefront a PDS shop that is working properly, giving people the proper amount of grain, the proper quality of grain, and at the proper prices. The next slide shows an AANGANWADI poster. Again, AANGANWADIs, these government daycare centers, can be either an excellent opportunity for students or they can be dysfunctional. So it's important to talk about what the requirements for AANGANWADIs are and to see if on the local level those requirements are being met. Right to information is another important law in India, and people sometimes fear that there'll be retaliation for it. The next slide gives you a poster that illustrates the kinds of issues that people can inquire about through right to information. Social audit is part of the government schemes, but it's rarely implemented. Social audit simply means that the community monitors how public services are delivered. The next slide illustrates that. We have found in our work in rural communities that when mothers monitor midday meal, the program starts operating correctly because those mothers know what's supposed to happen and they want their children to get those benefits. Community radio, again, is an important medium, and not only are programs broadcast, but programs are made by local community members. There's a slide about Humse Hai Sashin, Governance by Us, showing that a local police officer has met with the reporters and community members to have a discussion about important issues in that community on the radio. Man Ki Baat, we have a slide showing interviews with school children to understand what issues they feel their community should be paying attention to. In addition to these media, there are mobile phone opportunities. Many people have mobile phones and listen to the radio on their mobile phones. We send text messages and voice messages to people about flagship government programs. And last but not least, there are newsletters in local language that carry local stories to educate people about cases in their community. Legal literacy camps, it's important in organizing a legal literacy camp to coordinate, again, with civil society organizations that the community trusts. It's important to collaborate with the Legal Services Authority, in part because the Legal Services Authority can provide follow-up on the cases that come up at a legal literacy camp. It's wise to invite local officials to attend the camp because often they can solve problems that day. And it's very important to document the pattern of problems that occur at a legal literacy camp. We typically have between 700 and 2,000 people come to the legal literacy camps that we hold. That's a lot of data that can be collected efficiently. In dealing with community on gender-sensitive issues, it's important to remember that some things simply must be discussed in women-only groups. We are working with Mahila Gram Sabha, which is a way for women of the community to plan what they have to say at the Gram Sabha meetings. And this is an important tool in working with communities. On ethics, as mentioned before, integrity, zeal, competence, making sure you have no conflict of interest, making sure you're keeping information confidential rather than sharing it indiscreetly, and making sure that you are aware of your own biases and that you respect the legal rights of everyone with whom you're dealing. Lawyers have the standards of professional conduct and etiquette. For those working with legal services authorities, paralegal volunteers also have limits that relate to ethics. They can be fired for disinterest or abusive position or misconduct or being overly enthusiastic as a member of a political party, which could cause them to react with bias. Lastly, I want to raise the issue of documenting community findings. It's important to document with the community the findings you have about access to justice issues. Community justice case studies, successes and failures, insights on facts that are relevant to particular issues, strategies that you've tried, research that you've done. This kind of documentation makes the work that you've done relevant for future students, for lawyers, and for the community itself. Other forms of justice documentation are participatory research, monitoring government schemes against the actual legal requirements, how are public services being delivered. Also documenting the patterns of problems that emerge at legal literacy camps, and contributing to the development of poverty law tools. In conclusion, I urge you to listen, learn, and engage with communities. Marginalized people face much injustice. Seek the facts from them of what their lives are like, and figure out how law can be a lever to change injustice in their lives. In terms of access to justice, work with communities. What are the priority needs of the community? From what harm do people need protection? Plan your efforts to lead to legal empowerment of citizens. If you empower people so that they can act when you're gone, you've done a great service. Your contribution to strengthening that network will help students, lawyers, and communities in the future. I encourage you to look at the Learn More resources at the end of my reading material for Module 17. You'll find a number of websites to explore. Namati has resources that people from multiple countries have compiled for representing low-income communities. There are videos, audio tracks from community radio. So I hope that you will enjoy exploring those resources. Thanks very much, and I hope that you do commit yourself to engaging with communities both as a student and in your professional life. Thank you.